Hi, I'm Benjamin Morgan, the Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia. And today's just a very short video to catch up on some of the great work that we've been doing on behalf of our members and industry at Cootamundra. Those that have been following AOPA over the past few years would know that we've been intimately involved in a range of airport advocacy matters that span just about every state and territory here in Australia. And the work that we do in respect of these airports is largely centred on protecting the general aviation and the recreational aviation industry's access to these sites. Airport closures, runway shortening, and of course the dreaded landing fees and charges which we see introduced at airports all over the country that have such a huge detrimental impact on community airports. And it's something that local councils often don't think about, and that is what is going to be the consequences of introducing fees and charges at airports. They tend to treat the airports as individual business units. So on the council's balance sheet, they compile all of the costs of the airport and they put a fence around it, and they'll say that this airport is costing them X dollars. And then they decide that that airport has to operate as a business unit and then return a profit, which is actually quite a bizarre way at looking at that piece of infrastructure, because the councils don't take the same approach in many respects to the roads and other essential infrastructure and access conduits that are required to keep regional townships and cities and centres alive. And so airports, we often say in the aviation industry, I'm sure many people have heard this, that a mile of runway will take you anywhere and a mile of highway will take you exactly 1 mile. And it is really quite a true statement. And so for regional communities and councils, these airports are actually incredibly important in keeping those centres alive. And of course, about 6 months ago, the issue came up at Gundagai Regional Council that it was put forward to the council by the council staff that they should introduce landing fees at the Cootamundra Airport. Cootamundra is by far not a busy general aviation airport. It's probably pretty typical of most GA airport sites around the country, in which we have an airport that needs quite a bit of work, number one, but is obviously the throughput of aviation traffic is just not necessarily there to support millions of dollars being spent. Even though the government runs various programs and initiatives to help these types of airports with capital improvements, it really is up to the local ratepayers and local community to support their airports. And so what we tend to find is that there's a lack of awareness, a lack of communication and education to local communities of just how important those airport sites are. And so narrow thinking, unfortunately, takes hold with these councils, and proposals end up being put forward by council staff who simply say, well, the answer here is we'll impose fees and charges. Well, the problem is that if you've only got a few thousand users over a full 12-month period, you're not generating a substantial amount of income. And so what you have to balance up is the cost impacts of imposing fees and charges that then make that airport less attractive for the aviation industry to use. And recently I attended a meeting of the Cootamundra Gundagai Council to advocate on behalf of our members and industry against the introduction of landing fees and charges at Cootamundra Airport, and put forward the principal argument that by doing so, you're simply going to be discouraging aviation users away from your airport. That aviation users in Australia are already exposed to enormous costs and overheads. Just about everywhere we go as an aviation industry, somebody's asking us to pay. And I drew the comparisons that we don't take this same approach with other modes of transport. And this is a very important topic that we really need to be focused on helping educate councils with, and that is private recreational and private aircraft owners are no different to private people who drive cars with a caravan attached to it. If a private person, and in fact councils in many respects, invest significant amounts of money in local websites, tourism initiatives, they try to attract people to their area so that they stay overnight and that they spend a bit of money in the local pubs and clubs and restaurants and cafes, that they spend some money on some overnight accommodation, they potentially drive around the region and have a look at various things and maybe participate in local museums and tours and other engagements that encourage them again to spend some money in the local economy. And so it appears to be this well-proven model that councils all over Australia are encouraged via the destinations programs and initiatives to invest in attracting people to the region to stay. But what appears to be forgotten in this matrix effectively is that private and recreational aviation is an important part of that. Consider it to be caravans with wings, an opportunity for people to visit your region and to invest in your region and to contribute. And so that's what an airport is, and that's what we sought to advocate to the Cootamundra Gundagai Council, is to encourage them to take a fresh look at what the airport means for their local community and the role that it plays in helping invest money into local businesses. We also highlighted effectively the downside of engaging with companies like Avdata. Now, I've got some pretty strong opinions on what I think of Avdata. I actually think Avdata is a disgrace. I think that it's a disgrace for no other reason than it appears to be a business that peddles its services to small regional airports around the country, trying to encourage those airports to use their services to collect fees. And from that collection process, Avdata managed to take a chunk of that money, which they use to sustain themselves. And so we end up with local councils being encouraged to introduce fees and charges on the basis that this Avdata company is going to look after it all and they're going to get their cut. And so what we found in Wagga was that by the time Avdata take their cut, council are left with very little. And I asked the question of the council staff that were there at the meeting, if the purpose to introduce fees and charges at your airport are only to feed money into Avdata, how does this improve anything for the local community? If council don't receive if council aren't receiving a contribution and they're paying out most of what they take in servicing this Avdata agreement, how does it benefit the people of the Cootamundra Gundagai region? How does it benefit the aviation industry? How does it actually improve the infrastructure asset? And the answer to all of this is very obvious: it doesn't. And so we encourage them to take a look at the fact that these agreements are a one-way agreement. There is only one real beneficiary from these fees and charges, and that is Avdata themselves. It's certainly not the industry. It's in many cases not the councils that own and operate these airports. So a logical approach is to look at it and to say thanks, but no thanks. We also sought to raise some concerns around the fact that prior to going to the meeting, I did a little bit of homework and I had a look at the Cootamundra Gundagai's tourism investment by way of their websites and their local promotional material, to look at whether the council itself was promoting to its local community that this airport even existed, and that it's a gateway for people to come to the region. And what I found was there was absolutely no information about the airport in any of that material set. And so I encourage the council to take a look at that process and to consider making an investment in building awareness around that airport. The other thing that I raised at the meeting was that there was no Airport Advisory Committee, which enabled the local council to have a meaningful engagement and relationship with local aviators at Cootamundra Airport, that being any of the businesses that are located there, regular airport users that rely on that airport site, and so on and so forth. And so we encouraged the council, as part of this consideration for the introduction of fees and charges, to look at the fact that there needs to be a stronger relationship between the council itself and the aviation industry. Well, a couple of weeks have passed since that meeting took place, and I also think it's important that I note that attending the meeting between the Cootamundra Gundagai Council and the aviation industry, for a meeting that was put together by the council to try and understand some of the views and opinions of our community, were a number of private aviators, a number of businesses and other persons who spoke. And there was a really good cross-section at the meeting of everyone from private recreational pilots to private general aviation pilots and some of the businesses. And there's no point going back over many of the topics because they're all in alignment with one another. And the big takeaway for me from that meeting was that everybody who attended wanted a strong and constructive relationship with the council, and they wanted to see that the airport would thrive and become a real beneficial gateway for the local community. And it really shows the passion that our industry has and the commitment that our industry has for local townships, local communities. And it always makes me incredibly proud when you hear the aviation industry speaking about the fact that we are a contributor to community. We don't see ourselves as in any way as elitists flying private aeroplanes. And in many cases, we know the truth is that for a vast number of us involved in general aviation and recreational aviation, we're not super wealthy people. We're just average, ordinary Australians that have a passion and interest in aviation. And it's no different to Australians that have an interest in ski boating and ski boat ownership, or caravanning and caravan ownership. In fact, in many cases, ski boats and caravans are more expensive than the aeroplanes that we fly. But it was great to see that passion being conveyed to council, and it was done in a very constructive way. And I think that the council appreciated the fact that the meeting was very, very constructive. So a couple of weeks have gone past since that meeting, and I'm pleased to say that the council has undertaken a council meeting. And I'm just going to bring up the notes from that meeting because I want to read a couple of the. I thought I had it on screen. I thought I had a couple of those notes available. Just 2 seconds. Okay, so the council convened a meeting on the, I'll get the date correct, I think it was the 27th of October. It was Tuesday, 27th of October. And in the council meeting, they resolved to do the following. One, that the council would write to aerodrome users and they would now seek the nomination from local aviators and airport users to convene an Aerodrome Advisory Committee. And this is a really important first step by the council. And I want to congratulate the councillors for supporting this motion and moving forward on it, because it really is the key to creating a highly successful and productive relationship between the council that owns the airport and the aviation industry that's so, we just need it. We can't exist without that airport. So to have an advisory committee to enable the communications directly with the council and for it to be done in a professional and controlled manner, I think is really, really good. And it's a really great sign from the council to move forward on that. The second thing that was put forward was that in the meeting that we had with community, I offered to the Cootamundra Gundagai Council that we would be happy to work with the council in a formal capacity to establish an annual event at Cootamundra Airport to allow the aviation industry to gather at Cootamundra to help the council raise funds. And what I mean by that is to create a fly-in event that we potentially can run annually, whereby aircraft owners and pilots and recreational pilots and general aviation pilots and helicopter pilots and glider pilots, the whole community, can come together like we do at Ausfly and celebrate aviation and to help contribute to the upkeep of that aerodrome. And so one of those responses from the council in the meeting was that they have resolved to establish a working relationship with the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia to create that drive. And so I thank the councillors at the Cootamundra Gundagai Council. We are absolutely committed to that process, and I assure you we'll be following this up. We want to make that a real standout success and something that people from right across the aviation industry put on their annual calendar. That's something we want to achieve. The other thing that was resolved from the meeting was that the council accepted to undertake to promote the airport and the gateway via the council's website, tourism website, direct website, and social media platforms. And so that was a great outcome as well. And again, we offer our assistance with that. Anything that we can do to help them promote the airport and the community's access to aviation, we'll be happy to do. And the last thing, which is the one that obviously our community is going to be most excited about, is that the council has resolved that they do not levy the proposed landing fees that the council had put forward as part of the 2020-2021 revenue policy plan. So a great outcome on behalf of the aviation industry to see to it that Cootamundra Airport can continue to attract recreational and private aviators to that location without those people and those users and pilots and aircraft owners incurring fees and charges that would otherwise create the motivation for them simply not to visit. So on behalf of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association Australia, on behalf of all of our members, and on behalf of all the people out there that are not members of AOPA, but still directly benefit from all the hard work that we do and that I do on behalf of the industry, and that's probably a little dig there to say, if you're not currently a member of AOPA and supporting the fantastic, direct and meaningful work that we are doing to save you imposts and to make aviation more accessible, on behalf of all of these people, I thank the council, and we are going to be doing all that we can to try and make our relationship and partnership with the council as great as possible, because we want a great result for aviation. So I thought I would take this time today just to share this great success story. It's another fantastic achievement by AOPA. I'm really proud of the work that we do on behalf of the recreational and private general aviation and business general aviation community. We're going to continue that great work. This great news comes on the back of fantastic news that the Warnervale Airport Restrictions Act is on its way to passing through the New South Wales Parliament. I, again, on behalf of the industry, was before the New South Wales Parliament's Committee of Inquiry into the repeal bill for that act, and we were giving evidence last week, and we're confident that the government and that the Labor Party and others will see that it's sensible and meaningful to remove that unnecessary act. So lots of great work happening from AOPA. If you're not currently a member of this organisation, you need to be. Forget what there's a lot of people that might complain across the aviation industry about, whether things are being done the right way or things are being done the wrong way, or whether someone truly represents them or not. Put all that nonsense aside and try and look at the realities of this situation. You have a great organisation that's achieving great results, meaningful results for aviation. It certainly warrants support right across the aviation industry. If you need some information on how to become a member, there it is below. Thank you everyone for your continued support. Our usual Tuesday broadcast will resume from next week. We've taken a short break in broadcast just purely because I've had, I guess, a fairly full agenda of items needing to be prosecuted at locations across Australia. We'll be doing our best to resume normal operations from Tuesday next week. If anyone has any comments, questions or otherwise, put them in the comments field and we'll get back to you. But thank you very much again.